when we're live.
Where's Leah?
She's outside.
Oh, she's quiet. So unusual.
Are we good? Mackie, are we live?
Okay.
I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't see anything yet.
Okay. Well, I am getting a message that
Oh, there
says
you
we're
go.
live now. So,
There you go.
good evening, everybody. Welcome to the midweek/Tuesday FICA podcast. I'm your host, Carl. With me, your host, Naki. Good afternoon, Naki.
Good afternoon. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. And I don't have my
The infamous, the most famous.
we have a new doctor, newly titled, I guess. He's already got a title. His title is Muliagasisila. That's his Matai name, Dr. Faafetai Faaleava. Good evening, Dr. Faaleava.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So where are you at right now? You're in
He's at home?
I'm in Richmond, California.
Richmond, California, and you are recently back from was it called an internship? Is that what it was in?
Yeah, it's a predoctoral internship. So I was in Illinois for 1 year, working at the State Juvenile Detention Center out there. And I finished last month. So
you finished last month. And how long of a journey is that? When did you start that doctoral journey?
The internship itself, or the
No,
program?
I guess the whole thing, like from your beginning of college, or actually, let me back up. You can define that. When you decided you wanted to be a doctor, what was that time frame from when to a month ago?
So from when I decided, oh wow. Well, I started school in 2016. That's when I started my doctoral program. When I decided to go back would be the year prior to that. So 2015, that's when I started working on applications. I think a turning point for me there was I was teaching a Sunday school class, and it was the high school slash college students class. And I remember telling them, hey, pursue your dreams at all costs, like just go for it. And I think I felt convicted in that very statement, like, hey, you know, here you are telling these guys to, pursue their goals, and have you been pursuing your goals? So once I gave that some thinking and reflected on that question and answered it honestly with myself, I put in some applications and was fortunate to get accepted the following year.
Wow, what a journey from
2016 to 2020.
Wow. 4 years.
That's actually not a short time, but that is, some people, they go to school, they quit school, they go part-time, and they come back to school several years later. There's a lot of people that have gone down that journey that didn't do it with probably as much focus and dedication as you have. Have you ever?
Is about. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, typically the program does take about 5 years, but I did pile on some classes just to finish earlier. I kind of wanted to get out of school fast, so I took on a heavy load at each semester. But so quite a lot of my cohort that I started with in 2016 are starting their internships now, so they're in their final year. So yeah, it was just I was tired of school and needed to come out and
knock it
live
out,
my life and do something else other than school. I was about to be a lifetime student, college student.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Was it difficult? Because you were in Illinois during the pandemic, and was that difficult to travel back and forth? If you did travel and then you got COVID in the process, and so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things about moving to Illinois was just being away from family. I didn't know anyone out there prior to moving out, so it was just my supervisors were waiting for me, and this, program that I was supposed to be working for an entire year. Um, but fortunately, my fiance Leah, she was man, she might as well just bought her own plane because she was out
Right.
there quite a bit. So it was fun. Her support throughout the year was definitely it definitely lightened the load throughout the
Yeah.
year. Um, yeah, and like you said, I think it was March or
Mhm.
April when I tested positive for COVID. I was fortunate to be asymptomatic throughout the whole process. I was asked to test after a colleague had tested positive. So because I was around her, they asked everybody to get tested, and I came back positive. But I was fortunate to be asymptomatic the whole way. So I think the biggest struggle for me during that time, lockdown was fresh at that time. So
Mhm.
there was just so much uncertainty, and it seemed to be a lot of panic as well. That's when toilet paper and everything was
Right.
disappearing from shelves. So having that in the backdrop of a positive test, I think really uh, pushes you psychologically in terms
Right.
of, oh my gosh, you're hyper vigilant and everything. You breathe a little different, and suddenly, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's COVID. So
Yeah.
it was more of a psychological battle for me throughout
Right.
that time. But family and friends were extremely supportive during that time. And once again, I was fortunate not to have any symptoms, so to be asymptomatic.
That's
Was that
awesome.
difficult in a prison? Talk about that in a prison environment. You got to, it's already there's safety issues just doing your job under normal circumstances. You can walk through that a little bit, but even if everything is under optimal conditions, it's already safety is already an issue. But then to do it in a pandemic, um, kind of walk through that, how that affected the facility.
Yeah, well, there were when it first happened, a lot of youth were getting pushed out the gates. So we were reviewing files like, hey,
Who can go?
who can
Yeah.
be out on parole now, just to kind of lighten up our population a bit. Um, but there was definitely a lot of anxiety within the prisons.
Mm.
The youth themselves and the staff, especially because testing was so limited. You know, people were just testing positive, but then even for us to get tested at that time, I had to. They had a state facility set up for us to go get tested, but they wouldn't test you unless you had symptoms. So even if you were exposed, that wouldn't have been a valid reason for testing. So, I would have to just say, hey, I am experiencing shortness of breath just to kind of
Get a
slip through
test.
and
Yeah.
get a test. And especially because I was asymptomatic. So,
Right.
I could be the guy just carrying it around and no one knows and get everybody sick. So I was really concerned about that.
Right.
But towards the end of my time in Illinois, there was a small outbreak. We had about 13 or 14 youth that tested positive on site and 23 staff members.
Wow.
So, we had to then start, what was it? Like rotations, so we
Mm.
split the offices departments in half, and then have people work remote, and while the other half will work on site. So that was what they did to kind of manage it, as well as provide weekly testing for everybody on site. So it got even better. So within the facility, we were being tested. Youth were also being tested every week or every 2 weeks. So there was a lot towards the end.
So I don't know if you can talk about it, and if you can't, that's fine too. But the selection process for when you were reviewing the files, was it like nonviolent offenders that were being pushed forward in the parole system, or was there kind of a selection process? If you can talk about that, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I think at that time there was, the director for the whole state made all of those decisions, and I think those were factors that were being considered, first-time offenders, nonviolent offenders, and things of that nature. But yeah, they didn't really disclose too much. It was just,
Yeah.
hey, this guy's ready to go, do a psych review and see if he's fit for the community,
Right.
So those were the memos we got as mental health. So, yeah.
That's awesome. You, besides being a doctor, which is crazy amazing, you also hold the title of a Matai. And so that's awesome too. That's a big responsibility, right? When did you get that title, and what was the process for those of us who don't know?
Yeah, so I received the title Muliagasisila, which is from the village of Lano in Savai'i. I received that in 2013. The process, well, the family, well, what I went through was the family, just kind of nominated their candidates for these titles that were open, and my name came up, and I accepted. So I flew to Samoa, and had this whole ceremony with the village. The village comes in, and they are part of bestowing the title upon you, and also after the ceremony with the village, each village has like their representative of the government that comes in and fills out the paperwork, and then we take that paperwork to town and file it with the lands and title court, so that way it's official. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you, and I was taking your dad's class, so I probably missed this day, but is there levels of Matai that, like, are you, you know what I mean? Like, if you just got your title, are you at the bottom of the pile, or is there a level where you automatically go in? And do you have to speak the language in order to get a title?
Okay, so I'll take the first part of your question. Are there levels there? I think there definitely is a hierarchy of certain names. So certain names are just known to, be the representative of districts or the representative of villages when there are gatherings. So there definitely is in terms of. So the two main branches of Matais are the Tulafale and Tamali'i. Tulafale are the orators, Tamali'i are, what we call the high chiefs or so. So within those two groups are hierarchies within themselves, with the highest being the Sa'o, that's the main Tamali'i title. And then even among Tulafales, there's a hierarchy in terms of who is appropriate to speak at certain occasions and so forth. And then the second part of your question was,
Like,
can anybody without the language?
Without learning the language? Because I know some people that have like a title that I don't know if it's just like an honorary title, and I know that they don't speak Samoan fluently. And do they do that? Is there such a thing as honorary, you're just getting the title just because you're visiting, you know what I mean?
Well, I think the honorary titles are a sign of respect, a gesture of respect to, to guests that may visit the country. But in terms of speaking the language, because there are practical pieces to the title, like for example, an orator is as the word states, you're speaking on behalf of your Tamali'i, or on behalf of the Sa'o. So in that respect, it would be beneficial to have the language. But I mean, I know there are a lot of people that the family bestow the titles upon who haven't been exposed to the language, who have lived outside of Samoa for their entire lives or so. So yeah, it happens, but I guess when you think about it in the practical sense of the title, then it becomes more challenging without the language.
Right. True.
So let's take that a step further, the picture, and we'll give credit to Miss Leah Powasa, the picture that we used for your flyer, ton of comments of that.
Oh my God, that is a badass picture though.
There's so many things on there that speak very loudly. One, you're a proud Samoan man. There's the doctor piece, and there's the graduation hat, and there's also the pe'a that is visible. And I know that we've had conversations about if you wear the pe'a, there are things that are expected of you, and it sounds like, and maybe that's even more expected than the Matai title. And you had talked about seeing that happen, seeing the expectation of the responsibility that you carry with the pe'a. What's been your journey with that, getting it, and then how do you see the responsibility of wearing that?
Oh wow. So I feel like I understand every perspective of of this conversation, and the viewpoints that typically arise from this conversation. For me, initially, I was very black and white with it. Like, yeah, if you're not Samoan, you shouldn't get it, and that was just my um, like, disagreement with non-Samoans receiving the pair. That was the thing. It was more my disagreement with Tufungas, the tattooist, who would just give the pair to anybody that is willing to pay, for monetary gain. So that was my original stance on it. I mean, I feel like I've gotten more lenient with it, just in terms of how society is now, and the way we just have developed as a community throughout, in our migration patterns. But in terms of me personally, I wear this with intentions of really delving into the culture and having a full understanding of my role, not only as a Samoan Matai, but also just as a Samoan individual living in America, and what that should look like. So there's a lot of pieces to this. But yeah, I mean, nowadays there is a rising phase of individuals getting the tataus as a form of identifying, with their Samoan heritage, which I personally don't see anything wrong with that. We can't blame the individual because they have not had the opportunity to learn the culture, learn the language, but I do appreciate people who, are willing to express their culture in some way, regardless how limited their exposure has been throughout their lives. So if it means, lying down and getting tattooed for at least 7 days in a row with bruises and enduring that pain, then hey, you've earned it.
That's true.
Is that was yours a week, over a week?
Yeah, mine was. I think it was about 9 days. Yeah.
Wow.
We took Sundays off and 4th of July off.
Wow.
Does it hurt more when you come back after taking a day off, or?
Yeah. Yeah, because you're getting tattooed on top of bruises. So I think my skin is a bit more sensitive than usual. So it's tender, really tender when they tap the next day.
One of the you had written a post when you posted that picture. What I love is that you at first were going to cut your hair and shave and look like what everyone thinks is the typical clinician. And I love that you chose not to, and just to be your true self. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what got you to, I'm just gonna be me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 2016, I thought, like, okay, here I am I have this platform of pursuing higher education. What can I do? What can I do to, showcase this experience? So, whoever may be watching might think like, oh, wow, that guy looks just like me, man. He looks scruffy like me, he's got the long hair, he's got the
Yeah.
beard, he's tatted up, he doesn't speak like a typical person would, like if you were to see them in a university setting. So that was part of it. And keep in mind, me applying to college was me teaching was kind of triggered from me teaching my Sunday school class of high school students and college students, and so it was really fresh that I came out and just really try to embody the stereotypical image of the Samoan male in America, and that's long hair and tattoos and beard, But I mean, I was tatted up before that, so the long hair was just the addition and the beard. And I told myself, once I halfway through my program, before I graduate, I'm gonna go back to the clean cut that I usually get. I usually get faded and very clean facial hair. Um, and I remember I was talking to a colleague, and it didn't sit well with me at that time. Like, am I going to conform, or should I just continue this? Just as I had continued this image through grad school, why not continue this image through a professional career? And also because I'm often people usually when I walk in the room, they usually think I'm far any other job that's far away from mental health. Oftentimes when I walk in, if it's a juvenile hall, I walk in, people always mistake me for a probation officer, or if I'm walking in the prisons, they usually mistake me for a guard. And I remember one time I was walking through the courts. The juvenile hall is right next to a court, so a friend of mine, we went to get some coffee in the court lobby. So to get through, we had to go through the scanners, and I was with my Asian buddy, he's Dr. Doy now, Dan Doy. I was with him, and he's white top, like dressed up, and I was wearing jeans that day. And I remember the lady asking him, if I was the client going into court, and he was the attorney, so but it's things like that I have experienced a lot throughout this journey, and then even before the journey of academia, just within society. So, why not? I've reached this place, and hey, let's redefine professionalism, right?
Yes,
Redefine the professional image. Yeah.
I love that you did that, and I love you just being yourself, because you're like you said, you're breaking the stereotype of what a doctor or a Samoan man should look like. So I love that kids really get to see you and say, okay, this is what a doctor looks like. It's okay for me to look and be the way that I am, and still continue, a career in whatever you want. So I love when you wrote that. That's one of my favorite pieces. Besides
Yeah,
leadership.
we say that coming in, Naki and I are like, well, he's got 3 titles, right? He's got doctor, he's got Matai, and he wears the title of fiance. And I know Naki's going to get into that, so I'm going to go back to
Right.
the doctor title, because she's going to get all on your business before we get done here.
I already know it. Can I
So,
just shout out some people that are tuning in and that are shouting
Yep.
you out, Dr. Faaleava, Carousel Mala'a, Dean Willis,
Soma.
Ginger Elisara, Tony Fiso, Evoli and Lena, Yvette Manamea, Lena Manuleleua says, hey, and Ono said, ouch, or cough, cough, when you were talking about COVID. And Epi is on here, and just feeling Aotearoa, the Aotearoa gang. Just tons and tons of people are on here just praising and so proud. I mean, a lot of us aren't related to you, but we're so proud because we are Samoan, and to see someone that looks like us, in this field, showing that it's, and I always say this, but to show the kids, this is the new normal, this is what we look like. We're doctors and everything. So I love that. I'm sorry, Carl, go ahead.
That's okay. So talk a little bit about, there's all kinds of doctors. There's, dentists, there's periodontists, there's, what is clinical psychology and what does that look like? Not so much from the internship, but what are you going to be doing at your new position?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the degree itself. A lot of people do mistake this for a PhD. My doctorate degree is a PsyD, which is a doctor of psychology. A PhD is a doctor of philosophy. And just like a MD is medicine, JD is for lawyers. So those are the specific degrees that are at the doctorate level. So mine is a PsyD, which is our training is heavily focused on the clinical work. So right from our first year, we are sitting in front of patients and clients, and our training is heavily geared towards clinical work, whereas PhD training is they're more geared towards research and groomed more towards teaching and so forth, right? So we're clinical. Although PhD can have clinical psychologists as well that do a PhD in clinical psychology, but PsyD itself is clinical psychology. So that's the degree, and then you wanted to talk about the work. Was that what
Yeah, so you're newly employed after your internship, and so what is that going to look like on a day-to-day basis? What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so I accepted a position, psychologist position at Mill Creek State Prison. So basically it'll be anything from doing intakes for new inmates that come in to individual therapy, that's one-on-one or group therapy, where we run groups on various subjects. Usually those groups run anywhere between 8 to 10 weeks before we start a new cycle. And then also some testing, psychological evaluation. So that may vary because I'm coming in as a unlicensed psychologist, because there's still plenty more hours that need to be collected on a postdoc level before I can sit the exam for licensure. I will probably get all of the work from the other psychologists, like, hey man, I need this guy tested, go do some psych eval on him. So, that tends to be how it works. It's them giving us the experience and so forth, or them just, passing on some work and some paperwork and some reports for us to write, and just give them the results so they can work with it. But yeah, that's generally the job description for psychologists in the state prisons here in California.
And is there a reason why you chose to work at a prison? Or, yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, I was very intentional with working in forensic settings. So my first year in my doctoral program, I worked in a outpatient clinic, which worked with guys who were fresh out of prison. So they were on federal probation. And what I did there was substance abuse treatment. Second year, juvenile hall, all psych evals for the courts, giving recommendations on treatment as well as recommendations on placements. And then third year was the state prison in Salinas Valley. It was a psychiatric unit, so a lot of medicated individuals and a lot of individuals who were incompetent to stand trial. So we did a lot of assessments on them. So the work really, I became passionate about the prisons just because that's where a lot of it's guys who have lost hope, and I feel like perhaps the community has enough clinicians. The community has many things available to them. So I thought, why not go behind the bars and try to help out some folks that that are often forgotten about by society, or demonized by society, or whatnot. So yeah, try to reach out to the hopeless, and hopefully give them some hope.
Do you feel like, or have you found a lot of PIs in prison, and are they drawn to you, or do you feel like they're drawn to you more because, if they come to you, drawn to you more because you're PI and you understand their culture, or there's a language barrier and they're like, they're probably so excited to see someone that they can talk to? Are you finding that happening?
Yeah, so throughout my work, because I'm usually in a specialized clinic, or units, which are for mental health units. So far I've only come across two Samoan individuals, and one Samoan guy man, he would call for me every day. I walk past and like, hey, you, so, come here. And we'll just talk and chop it up. He tells me about his family, and he goes and gets his pictures, and he'll just tell me about who his mom is, and show me pictures of his family, and kind of talk about food, and what he loves to eat. And then there was another individual that I met who um, didn't speak English well. So, when I spoke to him in Samoan, oh man, he spent like first 5 minutes of the session just laughing, and like thinking like, oh my gosh, like, whoa, you speak Samoan? Like, wait, what are you like? So that was definitely a good, it was great sessions with him. But most of my work though has been with non-Samoans. Perhaps if I end up working in general population, I'll see more Samoans, but most of my work have been in the mental health clinics and mental health units that are more specialized towards the more severe cases of mental health issues.
Awesome.
So you come from a really, I'll call it a high profile family.
Oh my God.
And well-educated family. I mean, there's so many degrees in your family. I think it's your uncle that we had been told, and I can't even remember how many different degrees. Is there any other clinical psychologists in the family? And then kind of talk about your family and your father, his education in the church, and then just overall why education is so important in your family.
I never really looked at the family and thought like, oh my gosh, man, like let me just follow this path right here. There was a very specific incident that happened that made me pursue education right from the beginning. So when I came here, I mean, my dad, he's very much a whatever you're passionate about, go for it. My mom, on the other hand, is get a degree, she's been really pushing me to go to school ever since I finished high school. I barely made it out of high school in New Zealand. I was always at the dean's office, and she really wanted me to go to high school. So when we came here, she pushed it again, but I wasn't interested. I wanted to go the entrepreneur route, just, hey, I'm in America, I'm gonna be a millionaire. Like, how do I get to be a billionaire? So young 19-year-old, fresh to America, and all I had about America were the movies, right? But it wasn't until 2008, one of my nephews passed away, my cousin's son, and I remember sitting at his funeral, and he was 7 years old when he passed away. And I sat at his funeral, and I watched my cousin give her talk about, about her son. And I remember her saying, there's nothing more I could ask of my son. I'm so proud of him. And in that moment, I sat there and I pictured myself in the casket, and my parents giving that speech. And then I thought to myself, could my mom say, oh man, there's nothing else I would have asked of him. I mean, I'm sure she would say all the great things towards me, but me knowing that she still wanted me to get a degree was like a click for me in that moment. So I thought, you know what, there is something that my mom wants from me, and that's a degree. So I went to work next day, put in my notice, and started school that summer at Evergreen Valley College, JC. Yeah.
That's an awesome
Yeah,
story.
and then that's just been my journey when I got back, and then I went to UC Davis, did my sociology degree, and I think things started to transition. You know, the push became more internal for me as opposed to before when it was for my mom. You know, the undergraduate
Mhm.
degree, the AA degree, that was for my mom, but the more advanced degree, that was me kind of finding my purpose and kind of, you know, pursuing my purpose, I guess.
You had talked about being at different places and having seeing young the youth wearing different clothes and talking about college and in different neighborhoods there's different kind of conversations or different kind of expectations of the children. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, UC Davis, I was taking a class that required an observation in a classroom observation. So, you know, in Davis, I just called the closest elementary school and asked if I could observe. You know, they said, yeah, sure, come along. And I went, and you know, this classroom was huge, well supplied, a lot of resources, a lot of parents volunteering throughout the day. You know, like just work was just so easy to do. The teacher just had helpers left and right. You know, they were
Mhm.
even cooking banana cakes and you know stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just took it upon myself to be like, oh man, I wonder what it'll look like in another area, you know. And so at the time, my mom was teaching at an elementary school in San Jose. So I asked her if she could get me into a kindergarten class so I could do a comparison. And man, you know, she managed to get me in. And I remember showing up. The teacher was so surprised I showed up. You know, she was reading a book, and you know, as soon as I got in, she just called me to the front. Hey, can you read this book? And then she ran around and set up for the next activity. But the differences were, though, in Davis, you know, a lot of the young kids, you know, these are like, what, 4, 5-year-old
Mhm.
kids, you know, wearing like Stanford shirts
Gear,
and
right?
gear, their attire, their conversations were different, you know. These kids that during recess are talking about like, oh, I'm gonna be a doctor. Oh, you know, my dad's a pilot. I'm gonna be a pilot. You know, and then the conversations that were happening in San Jose, you know, well, the attire was, you know, Spider-Man. I mean, you know, nothing too much to interpret there, but just that contrast, right? You have
Mhm.
universities, and then you have like TV shows and movies and whatnot.
Right.
And you know, those kids were very timid. Um, you know, I mean, it was most of them were coming from single parent homes.
Mhm.
You know, there were just no volunteers at the school. The teacher was extremely overwhelmed. You could only do so much activities throughout the day because the teacher had to like pause and let the kids play while she sets up the next activity.
Mhm.
Whereas in Davis, you know, activities were just back to back because there were endless helpers there. You know, but conversations were definitely different though, from Davis. You know, and that's just exposure though.
Yeah. And the single parent household makes a difference, right? They can't volunteer because they got to go work. So
Right,
there,
right.
yeah, there's a Viliamu Uso who's on here. He's from Illinois. He says, I kept hearing about you since I'm in Illinois too. Hate I missed you. Really proud of you. So continue to forge the new norm. That's so big. So proud of Lofatu. We have tons of people commenting that.
This another Uso, man.
That's right. Now,
Yeah.
and here's random Epi from Someone Solutions. She says, hello, random. But I saw a clip from Asuelu and Kalani discussing marriage counseling, and Asuelu was very clear he wanted a male Samoan professional. Many of the comments were along, he'll never find a Samoan therapist, and aren't Samoans football players. Any Samoan male colleagues you might have in Utah that deal with family marriage therapy? Like that's the stereotype, right? That's all we know is Samoans are football players. And
Yeah, absolutely.
are you finding that there's more clinicians surfacing that you know? I mean, I'm sure there's tons, we just don't know of them, but are you finding that as your career is going forward?
Yeah, well, we have a PI clinicians Facebook page that Manu created,
Nice.
Manmalo Mosau. So that has been so awesome. In fact, they meet every second week, so just to check in, and it's a little support group for the PI clinicians. So we are finding more, and it's so nice to log in on a Zoom session and see new faces, and like, oh man, where are you
Awesome.
from? But yeah, we there's not many, but Manu keeps finding them. So
Yeah.
shout out to Manu.
Shout out to
and
Manu.
and Tone.
Yes,
Tone's
yes,
another
yes.
one that keeps finding it.
I keep thinking of like conversations that we've had, and like that's where the one about the kids. I was thinking of what you had said about the kids having different conversations at the same age in two different environments. One of the other things that you've said that really struck me in conversation, you had said, look, we need to get into the positions of the decision makers. Like we need to be at the table where the decisions are being made, so that our interests and our community are represented. And when I think about uh, kind of that group of yourself and uh, Jake and Faunga, you know what I mean? Like this is how you're going to change that conversation that the kids have, is going to be by getting into those positions and letting them see
Right.
things like Naki had said, that there are clinicians, there are there are people in those positions, and just the comments that Epi was commenting about, where people were like, "You're never going to find that." That exists in our own people. So big props to you for leading that. But talk a little bit about your comment that we need to be in the positions or at the table, have a seat at the table where those decisions are being made.
Yeah. I in community college, I like to go to protest and whatnot. But one experience really kind of shifted that for me, or not shifted the wanting to protest, but just shifted the whole mentality behind it. We showed up to a protest, and I am thinking like, oh, okay, well, we'll definitely get some attention because we're just gonna walk through the streets. But by the time we got there, police had already, laying down where we're gonna walk, and then everybody, all the politicians that were in the Capitol took the day off, so we were kind of just yelling at the building, chanting at the building. So that made me think like, man, how can I get inside that building? That's the analogy that was running through my head. And so today I think it is important, we can hold these positions, hold any decision making positions. If we just push through it, it'd definitely be tough, being that you're probably going to have to, you know, find your way through everything because there's no path laid out, unless someone else, another PI has been there before. But I think that's an important piece, like even when it comes to normalizing mental health. I think if we were to take up more positions within mental health, related to mental health, because our families are so invested in what we do, I think just through that, our families are then presented and become more exposed to information that could also, you know, open up their perspective as well. I know for sure, like, my journey in school, my family has heard every single research paper I wrote, because I discuss it at the table. Hey, I'm writing about this. What are your thoughts? Or I learned something new and I, bring it to the table like, hey, man, have you guys heard about this? So I think that is a way, where, in addition to groups that we may run and kind of just speaking at people, but if we take on these careers and pursue these paths in education, I think your family is going to be stuck with that information for as long as it takes you to graduate. And therefore, by the time you graduate, hopefully it's been normalized in some manner.
Great point.
That's a great point. I know Kara Soma just said, if we aren't at the table, we're on the menu. So true, Slim, so true. What are your plans now? Now, you're newly engaged. Congratulations to Miss Leah Boassa, who is part of our PBD team. So it's not like you got voluntold to do this. It's not like you got voluntold. But what are your plans now? Your new job, or you're staying in the Bay Area, and no set date for the wedding, or set date? I mean, I know the answers. I'm just...
Yeah. So next on the schedule is definitely a wedding. You know, we have a wedding coming up next year. But also I'm studying to sit one of the tests, one of two tests for licensure. So hopefully by the end of the year. But yeah, wedding is now at the forefront. You know, can't wait to marry this woman. She's the one.
Yeah,
That's all I have on my agenda. Wedding and an exam somewhere at the end of the year. That's it.
One last question before. You're growing up as the Faafetai son. Your dad was a pastor probably all your life. Do you find it was hard to truly, like, and this is a stereotype, that most wild kids are the Faafetai's kids, right? That's the stereotype. But did you find it hard growing up in the church? You know, you've always got to present yourself in a professional manner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I felt like I was always friendly with whoever came through, and as a part of that friendship was just being genuine with them, you know. So, I mean, I didn't really hide much, but it's always in the back of your head, though, you know, like what are you doing, making sure that you know, you don't do anything that reflects poorly on family. But yeah, definitely there was uh, probably in my teenage years. That's when it really was heavy on me, like a stressor type burden type thing. Like, oh man, you better be the perfect kid, you know. Also, when we were doing Samoan schools in New Zealand, so there was always a pressure to come first in the class, you know, because you're the first our son, you know. But there was this one girl that beat me like almost every year, man. It was very nice. So she would always make me look bad. I would take second place, and the next year I would come first, and then the next year. So it was always between us. But she made me work really hard for that first place. But outside of that, I think it's just it's nothing specific to being our son, but it's now like I feel like I take so much pride in for who I am as a Samoan, that it's more of a how do I represent my people and my country on every platform that I'm offered. So it's shifted to that now. And of course, you know, my family automatically becomes a part of that, but it's more on a bigger scale, you know, with this whole growing out the hair thing and beard, you know, it really does become about how are you representing your country and your people.
I think it takes the right personality, so that to not become, like Naki said, the stereotype, the buck wild kid is the Faafeai's kid. I think it takes somebody with the right personality. It takes somebody with the right personality to be a Matai and answer sensitive questions, well thought out and spoken clearly. And then to do the job that you're doing, you know, you're doing clinical analysis. It just takes somebody with the right personality and the right demeanor, and you are definitely that person. So, Naki and I thank you for being the shining example of, let's go find a seat at that table. Let's be part of the decision-making process. Let's be, you know, somebody who casts a big shadow as a role model. and you know, educate. There's just so many things about you that are right, and I think it just a lot of it falls into place because you're the right person for each of those hats to wear. So, thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, we always have access to you because I have a PBD member on our team, but we know you're busy. I think you're wearing the hat of another hat. There's the Matai hat, the doctor hat, the fiance hat, and now you're wearing the labor hat, if I remember our pre-show conversation. So anything you got, Neki? Are we going to allow him to get back to work?
Yeah, we're just grateful for your time, and we thank you for showing, you know, we do this show to show kids and everybody what a, you know, a clinician looks like, and if they look like you, and that it is possible for you to get to Ty's, you know, status or level. You can be a Matai, you can be a clinician, you can be a fiance, and look the way you want to look without being stereotyped in any way. So we're grateful for your time. We're grateful for you. Thank you so much, Dr. Faaleava.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to, you know, talk to the PVD family. Appreciate you all.
Have a good evening, Ty. Say hi to everybody.
Thank you so much. All right,
Kiss Leah for me.